With RAM prices coming down and new X3D CPUs being introduced, should you be building a gaming PC right now, or should you be waiting for something like Amazon Prime Day or Black Friday? Welcome back to PC Builder. I'm Jason. This is our April 2026 Q&A, and we're going to take a look at all of your questions, including what's better value, the current combo deals which bring RAM prices back to 2025, or should you be waiting for Zen 6 in the fall, or even Intel Nova Lake X3D. We'll also be talking about when we can expect new RTX 6000 series GPUs and RDNA 5 GPUs from AMD Radeon. And we'll take all your other PC building questions. If you get value out of this video, please give it a like, of course subscribe for more cool PC content. Let's jump into it. This video is sponsored by VIP SCD Key. Say goodbye to crazy expensive Windows licenses and that terrible Activate Windows watermark. Right now, use the links in the video description, head over to VIP SCD Key and get a Windows 11 OEM license for a great price. Pick your product license, then use the PC Builder discount code PC25 for an additional 30% off. Go to the activation settings on your PC, put in the code, and boom! Windows is fully licensed for a crazy low price. And they have Microsoft Office licenses too. Use the links in the video description. All right, we've got Musama GT asking, do I think prices are gonna be normal or close to normal by the end of the year? Raf wants to know, is it worth buying a CPU now or should they wait? Well, let's take a look at Amazon Prime Day, which is coming up in July. And then we'll also take a look at kind of the Prime Day in October, as well as Black Friday period. Where do we think prices are going to be? Because as we've seen recently, DDR5 RAM prices are coming down, DDR4 RAM prices are coming down, CPU, motherboard, everything else prices are crashing, GPU prices are even coming down, which fingers crossed is really going to hold. SSD prices are the one real sticking point right now where they're just kind of stuck. But especially with like the AI bubble bursting right now, and we are seeing it burst in real time. When are we going to see those kinds of price discounts? Let's start off with talking about Amazon Prime Day in July. So typically Amazon Prime Day in July is the second Tuesday, Wednesday combination that's actually in July. Amazon announces it ahead of time. They haven't announced it just yet at the time I'm filming this. And it is one of the bigger sales, I think, often bigger than Black Friday. In fact, in previous years, we have noted that some of the discounts that we saw during Amazon Prime Day exceeded what we saw during Black Friday. So just kind of get that into your head. Waiting to Black Friday may not always be the right thing to do. Of course, there's also the question is, are we going to have new parts coming? Because if we are going to have new parts coming like Zen 6 CPUs, Intel's new Nova Lake CPUs, new GPUs potentially, then there would be a reason for them to empty out the current retail channel of all the RX 9000 series GPUs, the 50 series GPUs, and the Zen 5 and Zen 4 CPUs, along with Intel's current Arrow Lake offerings as well, and dump those at a significant discount so they can kind of clear the channel and actually be able to sell something in the fall. So if we take a look at AMD's own roadmap through 2026, basically through Zen 7 really, they show Zen 6 and Zen 6C coming in 2026. Now, you might say, Jason, I feel like we're almost halfway through 2026. Where is Zen 6? Remember, Zen 6 is not just the Ryzen consumer desktop stuff, it's also their EPYC server stuff. There's a whole lineup of parts. It's entirely possible that what they're going to do is they're going to release the EPYC Zen 6 first in 2026, and we won't get the desktop parts until 2027, probably the early part of 2027. Although we are seeing things like this from an overclocker saying that the latest BIOS is now waiting for next-gen Ryzen CPUs, so they may actually be closer than we think, and we might be looking at a fall launch. Over on the Intel side of things, we are expecting to get their Nova Lake S series CPUs. This is going to be their desktop CPUs, potentially the ones with the 3D V cache on them in the fall. Now, it is entirely possible these will also be pushed to 2027. There's a lot of uncertainty right now, but we are expecting this stuff in the fall. Now, one of the reasons we're seeing such big discounts on things that are not basically RAM or SSDs right now, so like CPUs, motherboards, cases, coolers, all that kind of stuff, is this. The memory shortage batters PC market. Double-digit sales drop coming, says analysts. And we've already seen massive sales drops on things like motherboards and other component sales out there. So honestly, a lot of the people who make this stuff are getting quite desperate. They're willing to take a much lower margin on some of these parts just to clear out existing inventory right now. Retailers kind of feeling the same way. They got to move some product right now. So they're willing to take even less margin than they normally take, and they're willing to kind of pretty good deal right now. That's part of why we're seeing combo deals like this coming right now, where retailers are just basically working out things with the manufacturers in order to get big discounts to significantly cut the price of things like RAM, for instance. And they're not actually cutting the price of RAM. They're just selling all the other components at what you almost might consider a loss leader. Let's take this combo, which by the way, just was $50 more expensive last week, just dropped $50, really crazy. You get an entry-level CPU, Ryzen 5500. This is DDR4, by the way, 16 gigabytes of DDR4, and a decent enough B550 motherboard, an entry-level one for $229. Well, if you add up the cost of this, $190 for the other components that's not the RAM. How much is the RAM there? Well, do the math. It's like $30 for a 16 gigabyte kit of RAM. That's bonkers. That is better pricing than you got most of last year in 2025. Frankly, it's probably better pricing than 2024, which is really tough to think about. Similarly for DDR5 equipped PCs, so like a Ryzen 7600X, which is a good mid-range gaming CPU with a future upgrade path to it, $420, what does that get you? It gets you a 16 gigabyte kit of RGB RAM. It gets you a pretty decent B650 motherboard, one I actually like a lot. And it gets you the 7600X along with a cooler to go with it, perfectly adequate budget tower air cooler. Here's what I actually posted to the channel earlier today. $599, you get 32 gigabytes DDR5 6000 CL30 RAM. You get a Western Digital Black 1 terabyte SN850X. Those, by the way, SSDs are super expensive, especially high performance ones like this. And then you get a motherboard, which is a fantastic one. You get the X870E Tomahawk. Now, if we come down here and we check out like what's the pricing of all this stuff? Well, you basically get the $330 motherboard. Let's just call it $300 for the motherboard. Let's subtract that. So between the 1 terabyte NVMe SSD and the RAM, so it's about $150 for the 32 gigabyte kit of RAM and about $150 for an NVMe SSD 1 terabyte that has DRAM on it, which is actually the best pricing that you're going to see in 2026. And you're even seeing these combo deals on things like GPUs. So here's an RX 9070 XT, and yes, it's supposed to MSRP for $599. We know with higher RAM prices and higher VRAM prices that the price of these have gone up. You can typically find them now for $699. That's $100 over MSRP, but check this one out. It's $739. If you do the special discount, you put in your email and you buy it using that email code, it actually cuts the price down to $699. And on top of that, you get a 750 watt PSU. It's B-tier rated PSU, perfectly adequate for a GPU like this, say a Ryzen 7600X or a 7600 X3D gaming CPU. And on top of that, you get the Crimson Desert game. So if you add all that stuff up, this GPU is actually well below its MSRP, and you're still getting that right now. So then the big question is waiting to Amazon Prime Day or Black Friday going to get you a better deal than you can get right now using these combo deals? Well, the one thing you're giving up with the combo deals is a level of customization that we have come to expect in the PC enthusiast space, where I can pick any motherboard, I can pick any RAM kit, any GPU I want, any PSU, any PC case, and nobody's going to tell me what I can use or constrain me to a combo deal. And I get that. I certainly feel the loss of customization there. That being said, did you see how many combo deals they had there? I kind of feel like no matter what your aesthetic is, you're gonna end up with something that you can be happy with. Are we gonna be able to get that back by Amazon Prime Day? I don't think so. I think the AI hyperscalers right now are still buying the RAM up. They're warehousing it. They're buying the GPUs. They're putting millions and billions of dollars worth of AI GPUs into warehouses right now because they literally don't have the data centers to plug them in, and they don't even have the power if they even had the data center. So a lot of this stuff is going to be manufactured, it's going to be warehoused, and it probably will end up in the landfill before it will end up being used for AI stuff, because we are living through the biggest misallocation of resources in human history. And unfortunately, other areas of the economy are suffering for it because all that money is locked up in AI right now, and that investment's not going elsewhere. And unfortunately, we're suffering through a PC part shortage because of it, but it will come to an end. The big money machine has a lot of money in it, so it's got a lot of momentum, but at some point it will run out, and it's beginning to run out. I think the impact of that won't be felt really until either the end of this year or late or kind of early 2027. But I also think if you want to build a gaming PC, it's actually a really good time to do so right now, especially, and let me throw one more curveball in here. I don't know if you all been watching the news. there's something big going on right now in a part of the world, and this is not a politics channel, so I don't want to get into it, that might have some really dire impacts on shipping things across oceans, on the cost to do so, on the cost to manufacture those things. So just consider all that too. At the prices we see right now, there's things happening in the world that could just throw a complete monkey wrench, and prices could go higher. That's also a reality. So my advice is I would buy things right now. Real wants to know what kind of MSRP increase might we expect for next generation GPUs. So we're talking about RTX 6000 series and RX 10,000. I don't know what they're going to call them. AMD seems, for whatever reason, to hate like even number or things that start with an even number. They want to know if $1,600 to $1,800 by 2028 might be enough for an RTX 6080 or AMD equivalent. And Ryan Dennis wants to know, what's the GPU forecast? When will the next generation of cards arrive? What should we expect? Well, if we're just talking about when they're going to arrive, then I have a little bit of bad news, I think, for folks right now. If you haven't been watching the rumors on this, which is that, number one, let's start off with the RTX 50 Super Series. It was supposed to come out really at the end of 2025. Then it was supposed to come out at the beginning of 2026, and it has been basically kicked down the road. Now, the thing here is that we've heard the rumor that basically they're going to kick this to the third quarter and then make a decision. I'm going to tell you what their decision is. I don't think we need to wait for some NVIDIA insider to tell us that basically the RTX 50 Super Series is cooked. They're not going to give you more VRAM at the current RAM prices. They can barely manufacture any RTX 50 series right now at decent prices. Why would they release a 50 Super Series? Besides which, what's it going to make them? A tiny little bit of money? They need every last inch of fab space at TSMC right now for their AI GPUs, and they're just massively printing money with those things right now. So why would they even? Honestly, if we're talking about the 60 series right now, let's talk about the 60 series, because the other big leak recently was that the 60 series is going to get pushed back from 2027 until 2028. Remember, at the beginning of 2025, we got the 50 series, and every 2 years you expect a new generation of GPUs. Well, the next generation would then be kind of around the same time frame, January of 2027. Not 2028. So this would be an entire 1 year delay at least from when we would normally expect to see those GPUs. TSMC fab space is super constrained right now. NVIDIA wants to make as many AI GPUs as they can, but of course, the AI bubble may pop by then and their orders might completely fall off. In that case, we might even see the 60 series a little bit sooner, but I don't think that's going to happen. But then you're like, okay, Jason, what about on the AMD side? And so far the leaks we've got for the AMD stuff is mid 2027. And that is according to Kepler, basically. We had a bunch of what he called nonsense rumors in terms of where these were going to be manufactured, saying that they were going to be on Samsung's 2 nanometer. And Kepler basically said that's nonsense. Everything's already taped out on the N3P process, and that's over at TSMC. So initially somebody said, so release it end of 2026, and they said mid 2027, which would be a 2-year cadence, because we essentially got the RX 9000 series of GPUs. Now, they were supposed to come in January of 2025, but because AMD took their sweet time rolling them out, we caught them, I would say, at the early to mid part of 2025. So that's basically a 2-year cadence. This would be, if this holds, by the way, this would be the first time, I think in like 10 or 12 years, that AMD has launched its GPUs first. Typically, AMD lets NVIDIA, they follow NVIDIA. So NVIDIA sets the market with their new GPUs. AMD comes in and then figures out how to price everything $50 cheaper. And that's NVIDIA minus $50 price thing that everybody jokes about with AMD Radeon. And that's how we get our new GPUs. It'll be interesting to see if AMD does decide to go first, or if they decide to kick the can down the road and follow NVIDIA as they always have and kick it down until 2028. But it's really hard to say right now. So then where are things going with MSRP, especially on GPUs at like a 60 series GPU? Are we going to get back to the more aggressive pricing that we saw with the 40 Super Series and then the initial 50 series? I'm talking about the MSRPs, not what they actually came in at, where you're going to get a 80 class GPU for about $999, about $1,000. You're going to get the 70 Ti series for about that, $749. It's basically a $250 price decrease at $500 for, or $550 for like a 70 class GPU, hopefully with more VRAM, right? And similarly with AMD then comes and tries to super undercut with something like a 9070 XT that's a pretty big price discount, right? Especially right now in terms of price to performance on it. I think that by then, and this is my opinion, the AI bubble will burst, that the forced kind of AIification of everything, where they're trying to force companies now to adopt AI and fire their workers, even though it's yielding a worse product and worse outcome for those companies. They're trying to basically force this in somehow so that you have to keep buying AI and they have some kind of ramp out of this financial hole that they've dug themselves. I don't think they're going to be successful with that, by the way, and I think it's all going to start to fall apart here. So if that's the case, I think we're going to get back to that more aggressive pricing. I think we're going to get back to the more aggressive price to performance that we were initially super excited with the 9000 series, to be quite honest, and with the 40 Super series when we got cards like the 4070 Ti Super, which was a great GPU for $749. Only time's going to tell. All right, it's Steve-O wants to know, can you explain what a motherboard VRM is? I hear you say certain motherboards have better VRMs than others, but how do you tell? Well, let's grab a motherboard here. There's a motherboard that I don't know why ASRock stopped making for Intel LGA 1700, B660M Pro RS, probably because it's way too good price to performance on it. But if we just take this guy, right? The VRMs are the voltage regulation modules. So they regulate the voltage. You see this big heat sink here, and you see this big heat sink here. Well, there's basically little modules here that transform the power. If you think about the power as it comes out of your wall, that's alternating current. Well, it needs to eventually get to DC, to direct current, and it needs to be stepped down in such a way as the CPU itself can use it. Now, there's a couple different ways to do that without getting overly technical here. Good VRM will have a number of different phases on it. So they'll actually have a number of different modules that can do the voltage regulation rather than just relying on one that might get super hot. They'll kind of spread that out across a lot of VRMs. It makes it super easier to cool. It often makes it much easier to regulate the voltage itself. You get cleaner power a lot of times from this. Now, I'm definitely not an expert when it comes to things like that. And so I'm sure somebody down in the comments is already telling you one or two things I may have said that are slightly incorrect or I didn't fully expound on, but you can check that out. But basically it's here. And then you have the SoC VRMs typically up here, voltage for things like the memory controller and the memory and things like that. It's this half square here. You have some here and you've got some here. Now, not every motherboard you're going to see has big VRM metal heat sinks over the top. The whole purpose of these heat sinks is so that they don't overheat, because if they overheat, then what you're going to get is the CPU performance is going to end up throttling. And what we've seen in the past is you took a board like this, which is a great B series motherboard, but you try to run an i9 14900K on it, and actually this one might be able to do it, but lesser boards, you put a 14900K on this and it immediately overheats, especially with something like an all-core workload. If you're using all the cores at the same time in a big kind of production process and you're running it for quite a while, these things can get super hot and they thermally throttle. The CPU is like, oh no, the VRMs are getting too hot, so that dials the performance back in order to run within kind of a more acceptable thermal throttle limit. Sometimes basically the CPU will just crash on you, the PC will just crash. So that's what the VRMs are. We used to make a much bigger deal about this. I say we still make a big deal about it. It's just that what happened is for a number of years, the motherboard makers would try and basically get away with telling you that you could run super high-end CPUs on really crummy motherboards. And that just was not the case. They got flamed. I think the famous one, Hardware Unboxed, just really ripped ASRock a new one on a couple of the boards, and they had pictures of flaming motherboards. And so ASRock got super mad at Hardware Unboxed and decided that they weren't going to communicate with them anymore, which is not a good thing on ASRock's behalf. ASRock seems to have changed their attitude towards that, and they've gotten a lot better. So good that PR team is not still working with them. But basically, after that, all the motherboard companies realized, hey, these components don't cost that much. Let's just completely overbuild the VRMs from here on out. We don't ever want to see one of our motherboards on the front of a YouTube thumbnail with fire coming out of it, basically. And so what's happened since this time is the motherboard VRMs have just gotten so much better. They've just gotten so much better that we don't even talk about it anymore because they're like 20 phases these days. And it used to be like an 8 phase was a big deal. That was a good motherboard in the B450 days. And now you're looking at like 20 plus phases. It's like, geez. And the CPUs on top of that, especially on the AMD Ryzen side, just don't use as much power anymore. They don't use anywhere near as much power as the 12900K, the 14900K. I say that, and we just got the Ryzen 9950 X3D 2, which does use that much power. But you can kind of get my drift there. Basically, the motherboard companies realize we need to make this problem go away. We need to overbuild our VRMs. And that's why we essentially don't really talk about it anymore. I've linked all the combo deals that I talked about in this video down in the video description. Check those out for current pricing and availability in your region. If you got value out of this video, please give it a like. Makes a huge difference to the channel. And subscribe for more cool PC building content. Like, did you check out our look at 3 new X3D CPUs? That's right, AMD has essentially launched 3 new X3D CPUs coming to a store near you. Check them out, and we'll catch you on the next one.